Helen froze by the hallway mirror when she heard her husband's voice coming from the living room. Walter was on the phone with a colleague, and every word he spoke struck her right in the heart. "You see, Michael," he said, "everyone else will show up with their beautiful wives, and I'm stuck with this gray mouse. I'm embarrassed to take her to the company party. She doesn't take care of herself at all, just wears these frumpy, baggy dresses. What more can I say? After 15 years of marriage, she's turned into a housewife with no ambition." Slowly, Helen lowered the hand holding her keys. She was 42 years old, had been married for 15 years, and had 2 children who were already grown and living on their own. It was true. She had stopped paying much attention to her appearance after their second child was born, completely losing herself in the demands of family life. While Walter built his career at a major construction company, she managed the household and raised the children. "Oh well, I have to go anyway. Maybe in the dim light of the restaurant. No one will notice," Walter continued, and Helen could hear him laugh. She walked quietly into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Her reflection in the wardrobe mirror showed a woman in a gray sweater and black pants, her hair carelessly pulled back into a ponytail. She remembered a time when she was a vibrant university student, dreaming of a career in journalism. She'd had long, chestnut hair that Walter loved to kiss, and she knew how to dress in a way that made heads turn on the street. "Helen, are you ready?" her husband called out. "We need to be at the restaurant in an hour." "Almost," she replied, though she hadn't even begun to get ready. Helen opened her closet and stared for a long time at the dresses hanging there. They were all gray, black, brown, inconspicuous colors she could hide from the world in. Tucked away in the very corner hung a red dress she had bought 3 years ago in a fit of nostalgia but had never once worn. Walter had told her then that it was too provocative for a woman her age. She took the red dress off the hanger. The silk fabric felt smooth and pleasant in her hands. She took off her sweater and pants and slipped the dress on. It fit her perfectly, accentuating her waist and revealing her elegant shoulders. She let her hair down. It was longer than she remembered, falling in beautiful waves over her shoulders. In her makeup bag, she found long-forgotten eyeshadow, lipstick, and mascara. She carefully applied her makeup, and suddenly, a completely different woman appeared in the mirror. Elegant, refined, with eyes full of life. "Helen, we're going to be late," Walter shouted impatiently. She put on a pair of black high heels, grabbed a small clutch, and walked out of the bedroom. Walter was standing with his back to her, buttoning his jacket. "I'm ready," she said. Her husband turned around and froze on the spot. His mouth fell open in astonishment. Is that you?" he stammered. "Who else would it be?" Helen answered calmly, putting on a light coat. "Let's go or we'll be late." Walter was silent the entire drive to the restaurant, only occasionally stealing glances at his wife. Helen stared out the window, thinking about how long it had been since she had truly felt like a woman, not a mother, not a homemaker, not an accessory to a successful husband, but simply a woman. The restaurant was located downtown in a beautiful old mansion. The grand hall was exquisitely decorated, and a live band was playing. Waiters in crisp, white shirts moved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne. The employees of the construction company were already gathered around a long table. When Helen and Walter entered the hall, the conversations quieted. All eyes turned to the elegant woman in the red dress. Walter's colleagues, who had known his wife for years, could hardly recognize her as the same modest housewife who occasionally appeared at corporate events. "Walter, is that your wife?" the company director, Andrew, asked in amazement. "Helen, you look absolutely stunning tonight." Walter smiled proudly, as if her transformation was his own accomplishment. He led Helen to the table and gallantly pulled out a chair for her. His colleagues showered her with compliments, while their wives eyed her outfit with envy. Helen smiled and answered their questions, but she felt like an actress on a stage, playing the role of the happy wife of a successful manager. Inside, however, something had fundamentally changed. Her husband's words from earlier that day had lifted a veil from her eyes. She saw their marriage for what it truly was, a convenient arrangement where she served as a housekeeper and a decorative piece for his status. Walter was drinking heavily, laughing louder than usual, and telling jokes. Helen noticed him exchanging glances with a young employee from the marketing department. Stella was about 10 years younger than her, a slender blonde with bright makeup and a tight-fitting black dress. When the dancing began, Walter approached Helen. "Shall we dance?" he offered, clearly wanting to show off his beautiful wife to his colleagues. "In a little while," Helen replied. "I'm just going to the ladies' room." She stood up and walked towards the restroom. As she passed a half-open door to a service room, she heard familiar voices. Helen paused and peered through the crack. She saw her husband and Stella. They were embracing, and Walter was kissing her neck. "It's such a shame you're married," Stella whispered. "Although, your wife looks quite good tonight. It's amazing how a gray mouse can transform like that." "Yeah," Walter grunted. "Too bad it happens so rarely. If she always looked like this, then what?" Stella asked playfully. "Then maybe I wouldn't be looking for entertainment elsewhere," Walter answered, kissing her again. Helen stepped back from the door. Her heart was pounding, but strangely, she felt no pain, only a cold clarity and resolve. She didn't cause a scene. She didn't run home in tears. Instead, she calmly returned to the main hall. The band was playing a slow song, and couples were swaying on the dance floor. Helen picked up a glass of champagne and walked over to the microphone that the host had just used for announcements. Everyone turned to look at her. "Pardon the interruption," she said into the microphone, her voice sounding surprisingly calm and confident. "I'd like to take this opportunity to share some happy news. Today, I have decided to file for divorce from my husband, Walter." A hush fell over the room. Everyone stared at her, dumbfounded. Andrew choked on his champagne. "The reason is simple," Helen continued. "He has been cheating on me for several years with an employee of your company. I see no reason to continue upholding the illusion of a happy marriage." She placed the microphone back on its stand and calmly walked back to her table. At that moment, Walter burst into the hall, his face red with anger and horror. A pale-faced Stella followed behind him. "Helen, what the hell?" he started, but he stopped short when he saw the faces of his colleagues. "It's all right, darling," Helen said, picking up her clutch. "I just decided to be honest. Isn't that what you've been teaching me all these years?" A man in his 40s, tall with graying temples and kind brown eyes, approached her. Helen remembered him. It was David, an architect who had recently joined the company. "Helen," he said softly, "may I have us dance? It seems to me that such a beautiful woman shouldn't be sitting on the sidelines." She looked at him and saw genuine admiration and respect in his eyes. Not pity, not curiosity, but respect for her courage. "With pleasure," Helen replied. They walked onto the dance floor. David was an excellent dancer, leading her confidently through the steps. Helen felt the tension leave her shoulders as she relaxed in the arms of this man, who treated her like a treasure. "You are a very brave woman," he said quietly as they twirled to the slow melody. "Not everyone would dare to do something like that." "I was just tired of hiding," Helen answered. "Tired of being a gray mouse in my own life." "You were never a gray mouse," David said. "It's just that, until tonight, no one knew how to see the real woman in you." Walter stood by the wall, watching his wife dance. His face was contorted with fury and pain. He saw another man holding her by the waist, saw how she smiled at him, how lightly and gracefully she moved. For the first time in many years, he realized he could lose her forever. After the dance, several other men asked Helen to dance, but she politely declined. David escorted her to a table in a quiet corner of the hall. "May I have your phone number?" he asked. "I'd like to invite you to lunch once all this is settled down." Helen wrote her number on a napkin. Walter watched the scene from the opposite end of the room, clenching his fists. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Helen didn't dance again. She just sat at the table with David talking. He told her about his projects and his travels, and he asked for her opinion on books and films. It had been so long since anyone had been interested in her thoughts or listened to her so attentively. They went home in separate cars. Walter was silent the whole way, breathing heavily. At home, he tried to start a fight, yelling, demanding an explanation, and threatening to sue her for half of the apartment. Helen calmly listened as she packed her things. "Are you out of your mind?" he screamed. "You embarrass me in front of the entire company. Over something so stupid." "Stupid," Helen repeated, placing her few outfits into a suitcase. "Walter, you've been cheating on me for 3 years. For 3 years, I've been a gray mouse you were ashamed of. What's stupid about this? But we could have talked, discussed everything. Talk about what? Helen turned to face him. About how you won't call me a gray mouse anymore. About how you'll stop seeing Stella, only to find someone else tomorrow. Walter knew she was right. Years of indifference and neglect couldn't be fixed with a single conversation. A month later, Helen filed for divorce. David called her every day, inviting her to the theater, to art exhibitions, and to nice restaurants. He brought her flowers and books, listened to her stories about her past, and supported her through the difficult moments of the divorce. With him, she once again felt interesting, desired, and beautiful. He admired her intelligence, her sense of humor, and her ability to find beauty in simple things. In his presence, she blossomed like a flower that had finally been brought into the sun after years in the shade. Helen got a job at a magazine, returning to her old dream. At first, she wrote short articles, but soon she was entrusted with interviews and feature stories. Her colleagues were amazed by her energy and creative approach to her work. She bought new clothes, bright, stylish outfits, got a fashionable haircut, and joined a gym. She did it not to please someone else, but for herself, because she finally understood that she deserved a beautiful life. 6 months after the divorce, David proposed. They were standing on the riverbank, watching the sunset. "I want to make you happy," he said. "I want to remind you every day what an amazing woman you are." Helen looked at the ring in his hands and thought about the long journey she had taken, from a gray mouse her own husband was ashamed of, to a woman who was loved and valued. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I want to be with you." As they kissed on the riverbank, Walter happened to drive by. He saw his ex-wife in the arms of another man. He saw her happy face and realized that he had lost the most precious thing in his life. But it was too late. Helen was no longer a gray mouse that could be ignored. She had become a woman who knew her own worth.